Good evening, everyone. I wasn't intending to tell a story today, but I threw my hat in the ring. So, I never really wanted to travel or had any particular interest in it until I met my wife, and so she's talking about planning all these trips, and they sound exotic and scary, and so I didn't really want to go. And so she says, "How about we plan something that's a little closer to home?" And, my granddad was from Ireland, so I was always fond of Ireland. And long story short, we go on a trip, and we go around, and we rent a car and have lots of fun, and go to Dublin, and then County Clare, and then we end up in County Donegal, which is where my family is from, on both my granddad's side and actually my grandma's side. And so my mom sent us with some, information about where my great-grandparents were buried, and we thought it would be fun to go visit. So on a beautiful day, we get up and we drive down the highway, and we go down to where we think the graveyard is, and well, we can't find it. And we try multiple places, and we're scratching our heads, and then, my wife is like, why don't you go ask those guys over across the parking lot? And I'm like, what are these guys going to know? So I go across the parking lot, and I say, hey, how's everybody doing? And these are nice guys, and they're like, how you doing? And we start talking. I'm like, well, I'm looking for my great-grandparents' grave, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, Donegal is pretty small. And they're like, what were their names? I was like, well, it's Patrick and Bridget McGinley. And the one guy looks at the other guy, he goes, hey, Patty. He's like, wasn't your mother raised by the McGinleys? And he goes, aye. And so I turn to this guy, I'm like, no way. Patrick and Bridget, he's like, aye. And so we go back and forth like this a couple times, like how many, Patrick and Bridget McGinleys could there be in, Donegal at this time? I said, not many. So long story short, he's like, why don't you come over to my house? And we go over to his house, and there's they owned like 80 sheep. There's a bunch of sheep feed on the porch, and we come in, they make us some tea, and we sit down, and it turns out that this was my long lost distant cousin. And on the way back from the trip, we're driving in the car, and we look up and we see a double rainbow. And it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. And my wife was like, do you feel lucky? And I was like, aye.